president. Hello, this is the President of the United States. Who is this? Is it you again?
Look behind you.
This is my private line. How did you get through?
They're everywhere. All the time. We see them every day. But you have to look behind you.
There is nothing behind me. How did you get this number?
The spaceman told me.
What spaceman?
It doesn't matter. They're telling you about monsters. Please, you must look behind you.
Young lady, there are no monsters in the Oval Office.
The loudspeaker spoke up and said,
Wait, Sammy.
the loudspeaker spoke up and said,
Wait.
the loudspeaker spoke up and said, give up, give up, give up, give up, give up.
Wait, Sammy. Wait, Sammy. Wait, Sammy.
888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. Stay tuned. We're going to be talking to Paul Eno as well. He's an author of the Bell Witch Project. Is a new book that's out, which is many stories about the frontier ghosts and haunts. It's all coming up on Ground Zero. Don't go away. Trish Myers, who has been a producer of many wonderful programs, has her own heavy metal show online. Mm-hmm. What's it called?
Well, I have two of them. One is Metallicious, and then the other is Temple of Arcanum.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Great and wonderful person that's going to join you tonight to give us the story is Paul Eno. Now, when I heard Paul Eno was going to be on the show, I was going, boy, this is going to be the coolest, because this guy is, well, he's called the intelligent voice of the paranormal. He does a lot of heavy research. He's been involved investigating the paranormal since the 1970s. And he did it while he was studying for the priesthood. Oh. And he actually worked with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they are the paranormal people that were in The Conjuring. Mm. And of course, I think that's the Perron family story. And of course, the Annabelle story about the doll. Mm-hmm. Remember? Annabelle came in the studio and I was holding her that day. And he also worked with Father John J. Nicola. He's the technical advisor of the film The Exorcist. Mm-hmm. So this guy, he's well-known, well-rounded. Welcome to the show, Paul Eno. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Clyde. Thanis for having me on tonight.
I'm so honored. I'm so honored to have you on the program. And I also noted that who is it? Brad Steiger? Is it Brad Steiger?
Yeah, it's Brad Steiger.
Brad Steiger highly recommends you.
Well, that's very kind.
And I am agog with him, man. I love Brad Steiger. So if he says you're awesome, you have to be awesome.
Well, I guess I must be. I'll have to look into that.
So you wrote this book called The Bell Witch Project.
Well, I was a contributor to the book.
Okay, you contributed to the book, and you wrote about the Bell Witch and several other stories which deal with, I guess, ghost stories and stories that have happened when America first was settled by people like, of course, the Bells and others, right?
Sure. Well, early New England stories, primarily Massachusetts, and some of the Rhode Island vampire stories.
Now, the Rhode Island vampire stories are very fascinating. And I also, and I'm going to throw this out there, and I don't know if you know about it. You probably do. Roanoke. You know Roanoke, the Virginia story? Oh, mm-hmm. Good. Because I talked to Max Brooks about Roanoke, because that's one of the most fascinating stories ever for me. Was that really a zombie attack? Did they really eat each other? I mean, Max Brooks thinks that they ate each other. That they got sick and they basically had some of the zombie disease and they ate each other.
Well, I don't know about the zombie thing. I actually studied that in Haiti in 1984, but actually one of the other hats I wear is that of historian, which can come in handy in cases like historical paranormal cases. Mm-hmm. The zombie thing, I mean, the Roanoke thing, is an example of a number of times in history when that has happened. People have actually resorted to cannibalism. One of the most famous examples from American history is the Donner Party.
Yes.
And the whole business. People simply, if you get hungry enough, you'll do pretty much anything. Something you'd never consider.
Right.
But whether there were zombies involved, I don't think that's the case.
Well, he said it was some sort of disease that they all got. It's like he said it was some sort of
called hunger.
Well, yeah, that. But he said it was something like Kuru. That they developed like Kuru or something like that, and that's how they died. It was like some brain wasting disease, like mad cow or bovine spongiform encephalopathy or whatever it was. And he said that it was something that he felt would turn them into these, like, not necessarily zombies we'd see in The Walking Dead, but more or less zombies that were like they were completely. They were drained of energy, but the only way they could get the nutrients they needed was to eat the animal's flesh first. And when they ran out of that, they started eating each other. And that's why they disappeared without a trace.
Well, there are physical conditions that can cause psychoses, but again, we don't know. It's all circumstantial and hearsay, very much like the Bell Witch case.
Well, thank you for telling me about Roanoke. I just wanted to throw that out there because that's one of my favorite stories, one of my favorite mysteries. Next to the Bell Witch, of course, we're going to talk about that coming up with Paul Eno tonight on Ground Zero. And Tricia Meyer's with us as well from that neck of the woods. We're going to talk to her about her experience at the cave, which she has a lot to tell us about the cave tonight on Ground Zero. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. We'll be back. I'm Clyde Lewis, and you're listening to Ground Zero. Tonight, Trish Meyer's with us, and Paul Eno's with us, one of the remarkable historians and fact checkers about myths and legends and some of the earlier paranormal stories that are historic paranormal stories. Paul, I was talking with Tricia during the break. She's been to the Red River. And also, you were saying you were born in Lynchburg, Virginia?
Yep, which is very close to Roanoke.
See, it's just weird that she's on the show. I called her to come on the show tonight, and now she's telling me you lived in Clarksville, which is near Adams.
Yep.
And then now you say you were born in Lynchburg, Virginia, which is right next to Roanoke.
Absolutely.
This is a creepy show, Paul. I think we should run for our lives.
Wait till I start talking.
So, Paul, we're going to lean on you now. You have a lot of stories, and you want to, set us straight on everything. I would love to hear your opinions and your ideas about this story, because to me, like I said, it's second only to Roanoke as one of my favorite stories about the settlements in America and the paranormal stories that surround them. Tell us about the Red River area. Tell us about it's Robertson County, all that area, and what it's like for you. Have you been there? You've been there, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay.
Only once, but I have. I was on my way back from Alabama from addressing the National Convention of Mensa, if you could believe that. But in any case, I believe the Red River, if I'm not mistaken, is named more for the sedimentary rock, particularly sandstone, that sort of gives it a bit of a color, or did at one point.
Right.
Could be, that's my belief. But the thing that attracted me to this case, Clyde and Tricia, was I was interested in it from the normal point of view of anyone who knows about the history of the paranormal in this country. But some years ago, when they were making the film American Haunting, the producers they heard me on the radio in San Diego and then wanted to meet, and they were interested in having me work with a few other people and make a DVD at the time to accompany the release of the American Haunting film, which of course was based on this case, particularly the Bell Witch by Brett Monahan. And as a result, I was able to do a lot of research on this case, and I was struck not necessarily by the facts or the alleged facts or the fact that you can't really tell whether this happened. I was struck by the pattern of the case, which is what I had seen time and time again in real poltergeist cases that I experienced. And I said, wow, either this has some truth to it, or someone who made the story up knew all about how poltergeists work. So that was kind of the basis by which I got started. I was very intrigued by the notion, which I happened to watch the beginning of the A&E series tonight as I was waiting for your call.
Yeah.
And I was struck by the fact that they did not seem to bring in the idea of this the vision that John Bell supposedly had of this creature with the glowing eyes and the head, body of whatever it was, head of a rabbit, although I have it as a big black dog. And this sort of thing that got me very intrigued, because this is how a number of cases have started in my experience, not necessarily with dogs, but with something small, red eyes under furniture,
right.
Growling sounds, this sort of thing.
Right.
And so that struck me. They start small and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. What happened after the dog sighting? Well, the pounding started on the walls of the house. Things got crazier and crazier as people got, and I think there's a reason for this, as people got more annoyed, more frightened, more angry, the thing got stronger.
So it was like, that's how poltergeists operate. It's like they are, poltergeists are usually, they usually feed off of energy, so they're more of a psychokinetic phenomenon rather than a ghost phenomenon.
Well, I don't think so. I think that from what I've seen, those old explanations really don't, they're not good enough.
Okay.
And my son and I, we have a whole theory about what this, especially with the physical experiences I've had with them.
Oh, so you had physical experiences with poltergeist activity when you were doing investigation?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. I've had physical confrontations with one in 1974 when trying to protect a little girl who was being attacked by one. And it was, I felt skeletal structure.
Oh, my God.
In this thing. It was absolutely astounding. And I was a seminarian at the time. I thought these were demons.
Yeah.
And it was just beyond all that somehow.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to go more in detail with that. That's shocking right there, the skeletal structure, because I do know that there was a show we did a while back with a gentleman who claimed he was possessed. And he said that he came in contact with an entity that he could feel the skeletal structures. It felt like that it was a very light human being, that it felt like the skin was like peeling off, that appeared to him and frightened him so much that he sold his soul to it. It talked him into selling his soul, and he did so, and that's why he was possessed. And so the idea of possession, the idea of whether or not there really was a witch there in that area of Tennessee remains to be seen, whether or not it was some sort of tulpa or energy or some sort of a dark energy that was released by demons or anything. There's a lot of things at stake here. Paul Eno is going to set us straight on this, and Trish Meyer's with us tonight to give us more information about the area of that place in Tennessee where the Bell Witch once walked or still walks today. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700, and we will be back. I'm Clyde Lewis. You're listening to Ground Zero. Tonight, the Bell Witch and other assorted scaries in America. There's nothing scarier than ghosts made in America. At least, well, I'm biased. There are ghosts everywhere. England, but America has some of the scariest ones. Scariest paranormal events. We've talked about some of them tonight with Paul Eno, and Trish is with us tonight. Trish Myers, of course, she's the person who lived there. And so we wanted to bring her along for the ride just to get an overview or an idea. Well, and that's another thing too, Paul. You were saying when Trish was saying where she was living and what she had done and how she's been in the area and she's seen all these tombstones and cemeteries and farmland. You said, wait till you hear my story. Well, I want to hear it.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right, let me tell you what I think the Bell Witch situation really was. Now, bear in mind that when there's an odd woman around and people think she's a witch and all this business, it's going to get carried down through history. So I think perhaps Kate Batts is one of the most unfortunate victims in this whole story, because history looks at her as this witch and everything else, and Wiccans might have something to say about that.
Sure, yeah.
Because their religion is very positive. However, I think that we search for explanations when we encounter things of this magnitude, the things we can't explain. We look for explanations that we can understand, whether they're the proper explanations or not.
Right.
I think what we're really dealing with here, rather than a witch doing something, is about, I think, 4 unemployed tribal gods, otherwise known in my son's parlance and mine, parasites. Now, parasites, paranormal parasites, are the explanations, I believe, for our folklore of demons, servants of Satan, and even vampires. Because what did the ancient Babylonians call what happens when these things come along? They called them life-sucking ghosts. That's how it translates. Because when we deal with people who have been victims of these things, and they're not spirits, they're life forms, in our opinion, who move between parallel worlds, such as are almost pretty much proven by quantum physics now.
Yeah.
They have to eat, as any other life forms do. And that is what I see in poltergeist cases. I don't see recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis the way that the parapsychologists try to make it fit into modern science, which it doesn't do. And I think that's what was happening in the Bell case. As I say, it started out with this apparition of this dog or whatever it was. It got bigger and bigger and bigger. As the family became more agitated, these things fed on this. This has actually happened to me. Fed on this, got stronger, took form. I believe it was just from the nature of what is described, if it happened this way. You've got the so-called witch singing in a beautiful voice, repeating word for word sermons in just about every different church in Robertson County every Sunday, telling hilarious jokes, gaining recognition from all sorts of people who would come to see it. And you have a classic situation that might have occurred in our remote past. Because when you look at ancient history, not to broaden our scope that much, but you have the ancient Babylonians who started out, really the ancient people started out, many people don't realize this, apparently worshiping one God. Or three, a mother, father, and child family, divine family kind of thing with us as the child, whatever, something like that. Right back to the Aborigines in Australia, the Bushmen in Africa and things of this kind. All of a sudden, along come the Sumerians, and it's like something happened to them about 8,000 years ago. It's like they were bean farmers one week and lawyers and doctors the next. It wasn't quite that quick, but it was very quick. And along with these great changes and advancements came a move from 1 or 3 gods to like 5,000 in a relatively short time. I think these parasites literally took over ancient communities. Had this not been a 19th century Protestant community in Adams, Tennessee, in 1817, 1821, these things might very well have taken over.
You know, it's interesting you bring up the parasite thing because, well, there are a number of reasons why. One, I had a guest on a few days ago who actually, his version of the world is the left-hand path. He actually is a practicing Satanist. And he told me that the paranormal or that these entities, these dark entities that we experience are parasitic as well. And he said they attach to you. I also had a guest on that talked about the jinn. We had a number of soldiers, veterans who fought in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and all these areas where they were. And they said that they felt like that when they left these areas, they felt like that they had attachments of some sort of a parasitic or some sort of an evil spirit attaching to them. I was actually saying that, you know, in fact, the movie The Exorcist takes place, the first scenes take place in the Middle East, in Iraq or Nineveh or wherever you want to call it. And Trish told me something when I met with her this morning about her experience when she went back to Adams. And you were telling me, Trish, you were feeling a little, well, let's just say you were very sick.
Yes. My mother and I went out to visit the cave, and there were, like I said, there were 6 of us and a tour guide who went down there, and, you know, it was, I don't know, I can't explain it. While we were in the cave, I kept seeing something, but every time I would look over there, there's nothing.
Right.
And, you know, I was trying to listen to the tour guide because she was giving us information about the surrounding area, but I kept getting distracted by something. And, you know, we went through the tour and everything was fine, but literally the second we got out of there, I got into my car with my mom. We went home. I got extremely sick. I must have went home and slept for like 10 hours. I was exhausted. Just plain exhausted.
And another thing too, Paul, is I was I'm a fan of Sleepy Hollow, the TV show, and they did a show a while back about the Tooth Fairy, and they talked about a demon called Obi-Sooth, and it's a demon that I had a contact with at a seance, unfortunately, when I was doing an investigation at a place called the Rose and Raindrop, which used to be a funeral home, but they turned it into a bar. And what it was is Obi-Sooth was this demon that eats children, or it goes after the children while in the womb, or it attacks women before they can conceive. And we were having a seance, and Obi-Sooth showed up and attacked all the women in the room, and they all doubled over and got sick. But what was interesting is in the TV show Sleepy Hollow, there were children that were saying that at night they would see this demon show up, and it was after they would lose their teeth. Like if they had a loose tooth, they'd pull their tooth, and they'd have to put it under their pillow. Well, of course, you know, there's always an answer for that because Ichabod Crane is there to tell the history. And I look at Sleepy Hollow as Ground Zero 101 for paranormal because it talks about all the characters that either I've encountered or talked about or whatever. And what they did is they said, and this is what I thought was interesting, is Ichabod Crane told the police, he said, the kids tell me that this creature or this person that shows up at night is the tooth fairy. And he said something really interesting. He said, this tooth fairy idea, he says, all of these, legends of like the tooth fairy or even Santa Claus all have dark origins. And he said that the tooth fairy could quite possibly be Ovisooth, and that this Mesopotamian demon attacks children because when their teeth fall out or when their loose tooth comes out, they infect the area of the tooth and enter in there. And that's how the children are eaten alive by these demons, because they lose a tooth. And if they don't if their parents don't put a silver dollar or a silver coin under the pillow, the demons attack them. And that was the old traditions were that you'd put silver under the pillow, take the tooth away, and that would protect the child from the demon attacking them. And I thought that was fascinating, because it once again lends credence to the idea that you're putting forth tonight, that a lot of what we experience, that is these paranormal possessions, if they are literally demon possessions, or like in the Bell Witch situation, where there were these thought forms, these anger, these vengeance thought forms between Kate Batts and John Bell and Betsy Bell and all these guys, that quite frankly there could be those parasitic dark entities that can attach. And this could be the reason why they were having these situations. Would this fit?
Well, I think so. One thing you have to bear in mind, Clyde, I think, is that the myth and folklore are the vessels of the memory of our species. We have myths that exist, and legends. They exist for reasons. And any folklorist will tell you that at the basis of every story, no matter how crazy it is some grain of truth, something that happened that affected our psyches,
Right.
And I think that's the activity of these parasites. Now, I don't know about, putting dollars and, demons getting into people's bodies, but then again, you never know.
Oh,
I've dealt with 10 possession cases.
Right.
And they were very, traumatic, shall I say, especially one where the thing addressed me. But this was in the context of psychiatric hospitals where things were happening that the doctors couldn't explain. And if you could put this in the context of the remote past, you'd have the origin of a lot of these legends. But I think we're essentially dealing with life forms that need to eat. And that itself raises serious questions about what the purpose of the human race might be. Who messed with our genetics, if that occurred, and it certainly seems to have occurred, because there are 223 genes in the human genome that should be there,
right?
And et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I think there's something to this, and we may cast it in one story or another, or one guise or another, but I think it goes back to the same point.
Well, it's amazing that you bring up this theory, because I've been like I say, I'm willing to listen and try to understand each theory that comes about. But lately there has been, we had Freighter X on the show, Diablos Rex on the show. We had a Poltergeist show. And every one of those shows, someone was saying that for some reason now, and hell knows why, we are actually opening ourselves to be, these attachments, these parasitic attachments. And it happens when we leave ourselves vulnerable, where we either do drugs, like really harsh drugs like methamphetamine, or we do ecstasy, or there's this new drug called Flakka, which is very frightening. I've seen people look like they're possessed. They freak out on it. In fact, there was this one story about Flakka where a girl was so possessed with this drug, she licked every inch of a dance floor and shredded her tongue. That's how freaked out it was. And so the mind can open up to all of these chaotic frequencies, and whatever is there can attach itself, and it won't let go, because you're inviting with your drugs, your alcohol, maybe even I heard a story of a person who was being tormented by demons because of a tattoo she got, and it was infected. And so, these things, you can chalk them up to having some physical abnormality that's creating these types of possessions or whatever they are. But it just seems to me that it leans more and more to that idea that around us all the time are these chaotic parasites, or these chaotic, that's why they call it paranormal. It's beyond whatever, parasite. It can hit us, and we don't know where it comes from, but it's the equivalent of psychosis. It's the equivalent of a psychotic break. It's the equivalent of feeling like everything is falling apart around you. It's possession. It's feeling a need for God. It's feeling a need for something. And that's why now there seems to be this, like, for example, I talked about in the first hour before this program that's on A&E that Destination America is going to broadcast a first seance on the air. Or not a seance, an exorcism. And I'm like,
I told them that is a new achievement in idiocy.
Well, we'll get your comments on that coming up. I would like to get some opinions on this because I was thinking, yes, I wouldn't even do an exorcism on the air. But let's talk about that too coming up. Trish Myers with us tonight on Ground Zero. Paul Eno, a very fascinating show about paranormal, parasitic attacks. It's just an amazing theory. We'll be back with more. Keep it here. A listener named Kevin writes, he says that the mystery of Roanoke didn't happen in Roanoke, Virginia. It happened in Roanoke Island, North Carolina. That's what he says. So I stand corrected. Is that right? I don't know.
As do I.
Yes, we all do. But let's see, that's easy to screw up because I haven't really, I mean, the Roanoke story is something that, immediately I thought it's the first settlement that kind of gets crossed off the list here because of what happened. And so you really don't have much to stand on when you're talking about it except Roanoke, Virginia, Lynchburg. I don't know. So, Kevin, thank you for correcting us. All right. We all feel stupid, and now we'll move on. So here's the deal. This whole theory of yours, Paul, is just intriguing me, and it's scaring the hell out of Trisha.
Yes.
So so that means we wade into waters. I mean, you studied the priesthood, so let's talk it in a God way. You're wading into bad waters. What are the bad waters you're wading into to get these parasites?
Well, for one reason, that's one reason they threw me out of the seminary because they didn't want me doing this. But the priestly training does not include the paranormal, oddly enough.
Right.
And I got into it on my own for reasons that I probably don't have time to explain. But the whole idea of us applying terms and notions that we can understand to things that are beyond us really kind of includes the things that might have to do with God. And our terms alone, for one thing, our languages, especially English, is really, as much as I love the English language, really is not up to actually talking about this stuff.
I know.
I'll say the word soul, and you will think of one thing. I might think of something entirely different. Even God. What is God? He, she, it, or them. Depends who you talk to. What does it mean? Are we part of God? Are we separate from God? Are we islands unto ourselves? Or are we one big Gaia-like organism?
Right.
These are all questions that you have to resolve before you can even talk about this stuff. But theologically, I didn't think that was good enough either. Just as the old spiritualist ideas of what ghosts are, or poltergeists, or the scientific ideas of what poltergeists might be, they just aren't good enough. Maybe the people who have come up with the theories have never experienced them. Probably, maybe not as much as I have, although not in recent years.
Well, and not only that, Paul, but you're looking at a number of people who say, I don't believe in this stuff because I haven't experienced anything. But the truth of the matter is they don't know what the experience is. They don't know what it's like unless somebody points it out to them and says, you see that? You see that? That was an apparition. Oh,
well, sure.
It looks like smoke to me. No, okay, tell me, how'd that smoke come from out of nowhere? Or look at that thing floating by. Oh, what is that? That's an orb. Or those they don't notice these things because they're too busy looking elsewhere. I was in the middle of something one time, and I had the biggest shock of my life. We were doing a ghost investigation, and while I was on the air, I actually heard a ghost whisper into the microphone. It was one of the strangest things I ever heard, and I'd never experienced that before. I've seen ghosts, I've seen apparitions, but I've never heard anybody whisper into a microphone. We were talking about taking the ghost out of the room, and one of the ghosts spoke up and said, make sure that I'm not cold, when I leave. And I just thought that was interesting that these things are being said, and that, people who don't experience these things often are very critical, but you give them the opportunity to say, okay, let's spend the night somewhere scary, and they go, oh no, I don't know. Paul Eno with us tonight, Trish Myers with us tonight as well. We'll talk more about the Bell Witch and other strange scariness, and your phone calls at 888-673-3700. We'll be back. Don't go away. 888-673-3700. Paul Eno with us tonight on Ground Zero. The book is called It's the Bell Witch Project. There we go. Trying to separate the Blair and the Bell and the Bull. And we're giving you no bull, we're giving you the Bell Witch. Paul Eno tonight with us, and it's glad to have him aboard because he's getting my mind thinking, and that's awesome that he's with us, getting our minds thinking about what could be and giving his expert opinion. You know, when theories like this come about or the idea come about, it seems that people more and more are earnestly trying to figure out the truth behind these demon possessions or the truth behind incarnations of spirits or whatever. And one of the problems I have, and one of the things that sets us back in investigations, is when everybody tends to say that every spirit and every ghost and everything out there is just a demon. What do you say to people who say that everything's a demon?
Well, I tell them that they have not really experienced the phenomena, because none of that, as I say, holds up. The whole demon thing is often a retreat into an easy explanation for those with certain religious beliefs, okay? However, so is the notion of spiritualism when it comes to interpreting ghosts. They have to be spirits of the dead. I mean, what else could they be? Let me ask you a question, Clyde. Before the break, you mentioned an experience of a ghost whispering into a microphone. Well, how did that ghost do that if it didn't have vocal cords?
It used the sound around it.
It did what?
It used the sound that was in the room. It was sounds of compression engines and everything else. And I heard the compression engine, and we have it on tape. It said it. And not only that, but I also have a theory that when you go out on EVP hunts and stuff like that, that you're projecting that stuff into the tape, or you're projecting that stuff into the recording.
I think that in many cases that's correct.
I think that you go for it, you ask for it, and whatever energy's out there, if it's an intelligent energy like a, quote, ghost, it goes through you and it comes out of you, or it doesn't come out of you vocally, but it comes out of you somehow. Or it uses the sound around you to create the EVP, because it doesn't have vocal cords. But it does have a way to, because that's why batteries tend to die when you're out doing a ghost investigation. Mm-hmm. That is why, because they take the energy and they rob the energy from whatever source they can, including you. So that's why you go,
yes,
yeah, that's what it is.
You and I have to talk some more, because I like that. Okay, I've heard it before, but you know, I wish my son Ben was with us, because he's a sound expert. He has a degree from Emerson College in that subject, and he can really talk about EVPs or what people think are EVPs.
Right.
But in any case, to get back to your question, if I may, the whole demon thing, I say, you know, it's not good enough. None of it is good enough. And I tell people, well, there are many people who have very positive experiences, and I'll tell them that. And I'll also say that the demons, quote unquote, that I've tangled with, including during exorcisms. Now, I haven't performed exorcisms, I'm not qualified, but I've assisted at them with a priest in the early days, that those don't fit the bill either. They will respond very often to the name of Isis, for example,
yes,
depending on the person's religious belief.
Exactly.
They are in nature mimics, much like you see, walking sticks, things, animals or insects that will blend into their environment to avoid being eaten. Well, these or when they prey upon other creatures, I think these parasites will do the same thing. They will conform to what you want them to be in many cases.
Yeah, that would explain a lot. And it's also interesting that whenever you hear of the exorcisms, or what, like, for example, what was shown in William Friedkin's Exorcist was when Father Karras was in the room with Reagan. Reagan was saying everything and doing everything that would get on Father Karras's nerves or aggravate him. You know, where your mother's in here, Karras, or, you know, a number of things like that. And that's because there's some sort of psychology, parapsychology, I guess, some sort of psychology behind demon appearances, demon possession. And it's not that they read your mind. They somehow respond to emotional, electrical impulses provided by the chemicals and emotional responses in the brain. And that doesn't mean you're hallucinating. It means that there are powers out there that respond to you because you are a transmitter. You are a conductor of this type of spiritual, or what you could call electromagnetic bombardment from whatever it is that's out there that's trying to organize itself through your energy.
Well, that may very well be part of it, but let me go you one better. You really want to be creeped out.
Okay.
Listen to this. If you look at this whole multiverse theory and take it to its logical or illogical conclusion, there seem to be points at which we are one there is an identity between us and not only other versions of ourselves in these other worlds, but other versions of everything else. I began to wonder about this very seriously when I was lecturing one time at a college, Mount Ida College up near Boston. And I love it when I lecture at colleges. In the end, they put me in a big armchair like Santa Claus, and all the students come up and tell me their stories, right? And this particular, there were two freshmen, came up, two girls, and they said, we were sisters from the start. Never met each other before, never knew each other. We saw each other across a crowded room at registration day, and sisters from the start.
Right.
Why was that? And I've been talking about human relationships in the multiverse.
Right.
And I said, because at some point, somewhere and somewhen, among all these many worlds, you are each other. And I think at some point in the possession cases I've witnessed, that at some point that parasite and that person are each other. And since parasites seem to have a lot of free reign moving among worlds, they are attracted by the dinner bell of what we've discussed, the emotions, the pain, and they reach the point where they are this person, and that's what happens. I have never seen an identity in the sense of a physical identity with the parasite totally controlling. It is a cooperation.
Right.
And I've always seen that the person who is possessed, quote unquote, must tacitly agree to it.
Or say that they're possessed and they're doomed or done for, so they'll do nothing to overcome it. The cure-all for it, or the exorcism, whatever it is, the person who's being exorcised has to go into it thinking that the exorcism is going to work. I find it also, I applaud you for speaking about the idea that you can call demons out of people by calling out ISIS or some other god, because people always seem to think that the rebuking process, that demons only answer to Jesus, and that's not true. I've been on several investigations, dealt with several demons, and many of the demons that are there or that identify themselves are demons that are not in, I guess you could call them, the hierarchy of what is in the Bible. Demons like Pazuzu, for example, or Obisuth, or Lamashtu, or several other demons that I've had encounters with, or at least have shown up, not even knowing their names, giving their names to us, not even knowing they exist, and having to go back and say, oh my gosh, they really do exist. And that these are real names. Well, if they're
telling you the truth, which is highly doubtful.
Well, I mean, but why would they use names? I mean, it's the idea that I didn't know who the hell Obisuth was until I was at a seance in a bar, and all these women were doubling over in pain because the demon came in because there was a woman sitting at the seance table who had a baby in her womb and was drinking alcohol.
Oh boy.
And that triggered, and because I told people, I said, if you're coming to the seance, we're using a number of oracles, including a Ouija board, ladies and gentlemen. We're using a Ouija board, and therefore, if we're in this room using a Ouija board, we cannot allow for any drinking of alcohol, any impairment due to drugs, or anything else, because that will freak the board out. Now, we did it all well, too, Paul. We had corners. We had people standing at every corner to guard the entire seance from having any kind of demon enter in. And the problem I had is all of them were female. And when that demon entered in, they all doubled over in pain because they felt that thing enter into them, and it was looking for that child. I rushed that woman out of the room because I didn't know why. I just felt I needed to. And when I came back, I realized, oh my gosh, what is this? And the girl that I was with, who doesn't believe in any of this stuff, she was the scribe. She said to me, the demon's name is Obisuth or Obisuth or something, Obisuth. And we looked it up and found out it was a Mesopotamian demon that would attack children. The same demon they were talking about on Sleepy Hollow 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was like blown away. And they even talked about it in The Possession, that movie about the Dybbuk. And I happen to know the guy, Kevin Manis, who had that Dybbuk box. He lives here in Oregon. But it's just that the whole idea here is that there are demons out there that aren't typical, that don't come from the times of Jesus, that people all think that the rebuking of Jesus is the bacterial solvent that'll get rid of all of it, and it doesn't happen that way, especially when we're dealing with Middle Eastern demons like jinn and others that may be inhabiting people.
Well, I hear you, Clyde. Well, I remember one of the exorcisms that actually, there were three of them. I participated in about 10. 3 of them were on the same person, which I thought was not a good idea because I'm a young student. I mean, like they're going to listen to me, right? Right. So, and in the end, it seemed to be successful, but there were plenty that just were not successful using those methods, which were, of course, were Roman Catholic institutionalized methods, as you described.
Right. Well, and not only that, but another thing that irritates me is these ghost shows. that I watch, and they have ghosts, and they say, "Go to the light." And I go, what'd you pick that up from? Poltergeist? They say, how would you like it if I said to you, go to the bathroom, and you didn't have to go to the bathroom? Would you go to the bathroom? No. I go, then why do you tell ghosts to go to the light? I mean, they don't have to go to the light because you tell them to. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And whenever I go on a ghost hunt, I hear somebody say, go to the light. I say, get the hell out of here. I don't want you around here because you're a moron. And you're going to tempt or piss off the ghost or the demon or whatever it is that's in this room. I don't have anything to do with you. So, I mean, thank heaven for you, Paul Eno. I just thank you for bringing some intelligence to the conversation of the paranormal, because quite frankly, there are so many amateurs out there. And I want to get more on the Bell Witch because we have a relative of the Bell Witch waiting online. But I also want to talk about this exorcism coming up on this Destination America. I want to talk about that too and how this may be a backfire. 888-673-3700. We'll be back because of the fact that there's new interest in the Bell Witch investigation. You know, so much information or very little information about Kate Batts. She was deemed the witch. Okay. Now this is where it gets confusing. This guy who's doing the show tonight on A&E claims that he comes from a family line from, I believe, Kate Batts, that he was that I guess John Bell had an affair with Kate Batts. Is that true?
Well, he claims that he had he was descended from the Bell family. Well, I'll tell you something about Kate Batts, Clyde. My genealogical information is that Kate Batts was the niece of Lucy Williams Bell, John Bell's wife. So she was his niece by marriage. Much more interesting is the idea that there was sexual abuse going on by John Bell of the daughter Betsy. The pattern of the phenomena is very interesting in that light. So I think that we may have a case. As I say, I think Kate is sort of the historical victim in this. There is no evidence that I've ever found of any land dispute that said that she put a curse on the family. As a matter of fact, there's no evidence that she was a witch at all, whatever that may mean.
Yeah.
I think we've got John Bell ringing the dinner bell for parasites by perhaps sexually abusing Lucy. That came out later in her life, supposedly when she was married and much later. And the whole pattern of the abuse of Lucy by the entity, and then the thing turning on John Bell and supposedly killing him, it's something I think is exaggerated, is much more interesting to me than any story about Kate Batts.
What I want to get on is Leslie. She's calling from San Diego, California, and Leslie says that she is a relative of Kate Batts. Go ahead, Leslie. You're on with Paul Eno.
Yes, good evening, you guys. I'm glad that you're doing this show tonight. I've learned actually a little bit so far that I didn't really know before concerning the story. The reason why I call Clyde is because I was thinking about this as a result of you covering it on the show tonight, and I remember an aspect of the story where the spirit, the poltergeist that was involved in this situation was actually given sermons in the house of the Bell family.
Right.
That's right.
And it was later, and it was later discovered that actually this spirit, this poltergeist, was mimicking sermons that were going on 30, 40 miles away, I think by a Baptist preacher, which always kind of astounded me, because that tells me that there's some type of time transit. I don't know how would you term that, Clyde?
I would say, maybe I've said before, transitory, some sort of transitory mimicking, where they were aware, or the spirit was aware of what this priest was talking about. And Paul, wouldn't there be like some sort of if there was a problem here, because I remember that Minister Johnston was there as well. Could they have been in on some sort of an abusive situation where the Baptist minister there would turn the other way, and maybe that's why you would have a demon quoting scripture? Because I've said before, when Jesus was in the wilderness, Satan would quote scripture, no problem.
Sure. Well, anything is possible, Clyde. I mean, especially at this distance in time. What I think might have been happening here is, as you say, a time sort of thing. And the entire idea of the multiverse comes really from the general theory of relativity, Albert Einstein's theory, that essentially amounts to the idea that there is no past, there is no future, everything is simultaneous. And when you're like these parasites that we've seen reaching into different worlds at the same time, feeding on different kinds of life forms, including us, then you can see that this thing could very easily be aware of what's going on in the church 40 miles away and what's going on in the Bell House. It's nothing to it.
Yeah, and let's say I've never heard that before, and that would really be a creepy thing, that if the entity was there quoting sermons from a minister that's 40 miles away, that would be I think that just seeing that or even experiencing that would be enough to creep anybody out.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, Kate Batts was she was my father's grandmother's sister. Or I'm sorry, my father's great grandmother's sister.
Okay.
And so that kind of surprised me because my dad didn't tell me about this until I was older. But Robertson County was also named after my great uncle, who was General James Robertson. So there is some family history of mine in Tennessee. Personally, just in closing, because I don't want to take up too much time, I don't really agree with what Kate Batts did in reference to this curse thing, So, but I did also want to make a comment. The cave, the Bell Witch Cave, I did a little bit of reading on that, and it appears that there's some kind of electromagnetic activity going on in the cave.
Right.
That's what I picked up there.
Is there a lot of crystal in the cave? Are we looking at basalt and crystal in the cave? Just like many of those caves have that, and that has always been the situation where crystals, anything with crystalline type substances in caves or even water aquifers, sometimes attract spirits because of there's a lot of energy that absorbs in crystal, and of course, running water gives off the negative ions that can create that sort of feeling as well.
Well, you end up conducting electromagnetic fields, but there's also a lot of limestone.
Yeah, that's true. Limestone does it as well. Leslie, I want to thank you for calling the program and give us a little bit of insight of the area, also letting us know about how Kate Batts is your relative. That's amazing that we have somebody listening who has family and they're really close to this. And I really thank you for calling the program tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Clyde.
Have a great night. Take care. Paul Eno with us tonight on Ground Zero. Great call from Leslie, calling in from San Diego tonight about her family. Kate Batts, of course, the alleged witch in the Bell Witch case. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. More to come with Paul Eno right here on Ground. Don't go away. The thing that's most... the most interesting is that whenever you have, Paul, whenever you have an interesting conversation or you have an intelligent conversation about people like you, for example, that have experienced the paranormal, had a background in religious studies, and I mean a background in religious studies that are not biased to one pantheon or another, people take offense if you tell them that everything that you've been taught to ward off ghosts or spirits or whatever, throw it out. Because I had a situation where I was doing an investigation, a preliminary investigation of a poltergeist story, and I got the woman on the phone, and they had already been visited by a ghost hunter group that came in, and they turned on their lights and did their booga booga and flashed their little light beams everywhere and did their thing, and then walked out and said, we found nothing. And yet this poor little girl that was living in the house was traumatized. And the mother didn't know what to think. And then the ghost group went out and they basically used all their information and put on their Facebook page and didn't ask permission and definitely exploited the case. And I'm thinking to myself, this is where we have to be careful. This is where we have to put ourselves on guard because there are people out there that they say, well, they're into the ghost hunting thing because it's their spiritual experience. It's their way to avoid going to church. It's their way to avoid, studying a religion or anything else like that. They think that this is my spiritual experience. This hunting ghosts is my spiritual experience. And it doesn't have, and it's not supposed to be that way. And so I talked to her about a few things and I said to her, like, for example, and this is going to throw everybody off. I said to her, do you have any dream catchers in the house? She's everywhere. I said, take them out of there now. Take them, put them somewhere, hide them because they attract these spirits you're having in the house because it was some sort of a dark spirit. It was it was sort of this one of these child catching type spirits, poltergeist activity. And then I asked a question. I says, how many crosses do you have hanging on your wall? She goes, every wall has a cross. I go, take them down. And a lot of people don't realize that. And I learned this from priests actually, and have told me this. Maybe you learned the same thing, but they say that crucifixes and crosses are not to be used as ornaments on a house or in a house. They are used for prayer. They are used for thinking and contemplating and meditation with God. And some people go overboard with the crosses on the walls. And what that does is that attracts certain types of things that maybe aren't desirable, that a cross alone is not going to protect you from an entity that wants to challenge that cross. And you tell that to people, oh, no, the cross of God protects me. Or they take the Bible and they use it as a way to ward off a spirit. These things are not supposed to be used for that purpose. Am I correct here?
Well, actually, you are. I wish you lived closer so we could hang out, because we seem to be on the same page. We need to hang out.
Yeah, I mean, I need to talk more to you, because I think that you and I both have basically trained in the same places. Because I mean, I shake my head at what I see on TV. I shake my head at exorcisms that they're going to have on television, stuff like that, because they don't do them right. They just don't.
Oh, it's terrible. Well, I will tell you that the worst cases I've seen of poltergeist, or what people might call demonic infestation, have been in homes where people have strong, old-time religious beliefs that are really very negative. Crosses on every wall, as you say, and all this business, including the Bridgeport case 74, where I worked with Ed and Lorraine Warren on that, and we were all convinced it was demons. The things that be torn off the wall, thrown on the floor, and things of this kind.
Yeah.
Because and icons and crucifixes should be used for prayer.
Yes,
as you say.
And that's the thing, is you don't use God as an ornament, and people do. And that's the thing, is that it is those types of things that, they always say, well, you say things about God, you're mocking. And I'm going, what's more mocking than anything else is using Jesus as a token or an ornament on your wall all the time. Or not using him in prayer, or not thinking and contemplating the cross when you're there on your knees, rather than having it in front of you on a wall all the time, which is attracting and challenging spirits to attack. And I know this is uncomfortable for people to hear, but we're learning more and more about how these entities operate. And I always say, Jesus is the cleanser that gets most of them out of there. But when you're having a hard time, and I said this once and someone disagreed with me, when you're having a hard time, you have the power as a human being to call upon the hierarchies of the warrior angels to take out these demons if you need to. And they will respond to a lot of angels, because they're basically on the same page, except they're fallen, or they're otherwise part of some hierarchy that they understand who these people are, and they're afraid of them. They simply are.
I hear you, because how many times in the Gospels did Jesus heal somebody and said, it's your faith that's made you well?
Yes, exactly.
And the power has to come from inside the person. You see that time and time again. I've seen children protected by teddy bears.
Yes.
Because it's a conduit for their own power.
Yeah, and people need to understand that they have more power against these entities, and that as a last resort, you rebuke. As a last resort, you go and you get an exorcist. As a last resort, you need to have a house cleansed, because people need to remember that they're not powerless to these entities. And I get people all the time saying, oh man, you must side with Satan. You talk about this all the time. I said, get a clue, guys. It's Halloween. It's a Halloween time. I'm talking about paranormal more so than I usually do at Halloween. And it's not because I'm some Satanist or some spiritualist that believes in the devil more so than I believe in Jesus. I also know that Wicca is a great religion for people who practice Wicca. And I do know, though, that there are witches out there that do have intercourses with Satan. That's okay, because they do that. But I'm trying to differentiate. You can't always do that. So the good witches know who they are. And I wish I didn't have to step down and say, no, I'm not putting every witch in the same category as a witch that would have some sort of intercourse with Satan. I wouldn't want that, and I wouldn't say that about all witches. But of course, everybody else paints them with the brush, so it has to be like everybody else, and it's not that way.
Well, it's true. I'm astounded by the people who blame me for not embracing their religious beliefs, and they don't even understand their own religion in the first place.
They don't know that you had a background in the priesthood. They don't know, and I tell people, little do you know, I'm secular because it makes it more open for everybody. But the truth is I have a background in religion. I have a background in studying Latin and theology. And I had to do it because I wanted to understand more than just what the Bible gave me. And I want to understand more than, I had to read the book of Enoch, the book of Maccabees. I was reading everything I get my hands on. So I know a little bit about religion, about everybody's belief systems and cultures.
That's why I studied Hebrew.
Oh, you did? Okay.
So I could read Genesis and the original. And that's a pretty amazing story. Might be for another show.
I learned Latin, so I could read. I read Latin, and I was taught by the priests. I was taught by the Catholic priests to learn a little bit of Latin, because I speak Spanish, and I figured, hey, Latin's not far of a jump. I can do that too.
No, it's a great help with the Romance languages.
It is. It's really awesome. Let's go to Joe in Arizona. Hi, Joe. You're on Ground Zero.
Oh, hi. Good.
Hi.
Thanks for taking the call.
You bet.
I actually, in 1969, was in the service, stationed in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, which is right next to Clarksville, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine, three of us, we had to leave and, a weekend leave. So he said, well, and there was somehow, I don't know where it came from, the Bell Witch came up. Okay. The Bell Witch story. and he said he knew where the cave was. So what's called the Bell Witch Cave. Again, I don't know, Andrew Jackson's coach supposedly went by there once and got freaked out, and there was all kinds of stories. I don't remember them all because it's just so long ago. Anyway, we went looking for it. Very near it, I remember a snake pit. It was actually marked off limits on one of our boards, our bulletin boards, that we weren't supposed to go in that area because of the snake pit. And we were near there, and that was near the Bell Witch Cave, apparently. All I can remember about that snake pit was that it was well named. I mean, this thing was nothing but a deep pit. It was rather warm, there close to the edges. And there, I mean, I swear to God, every ledge, every rock looked like it had a rattlesnake sitting on it, a timber rattler. It was amazing. It was the most amazing thing I ever saw.
Wow.
Anyway, to the Bell Witch Cave. He knew where it was. We were, walking up this hill and then we were walking through the woods. He knew how to get to it. And as we approached, what he said was, there it is. And it was big. It was a good-sized mound. I won't call it a mountain, but I'll call it a good-sized mound. And, a very wide opening. And as we approached, and I heard the gentleman, your guest, mentioned something about a dog.
Yeah, a dog that was
no dog.
Yeah.
Well, this was a rabbit, and it was the size of a dog. I mean, I'd say a medium-sized dog. It was all white and had a black leg. Its left leg was black with a black foot. In other words, it was like that was the only black on it. As we approached, because I guess we were here. We were going to go check it out. A little spooked. I'm pretty sure, as I remember, we had spooked ourselves a little bit. Uh-huh. As we approached, this thing turned on us and literally stood us off like a watchdog. And we, it was not much of a story, but we just I said, hey, I ain't going near that thing. I mean, this was like, I don't know how to compare it to other than a Monty Python movie.
I was thinking about the killer rabbit.
Kyle Banner.
Exactly.
Kyle Banner. I mean, I swear to God, this thing I thought was going to kill us. It had, the eyes weren't red per se. They were, kind of red, I guess, but they weren't like glowing red or frightening red like you would see in some photo or a painting.
I want to ask a quick question before we go to the break. Joe brings up this animal. Sure. Is this indication, Paul? Is this indication of perhaps an odd familiar that perhaps was some sort of a mutant or something that was seen by Mr. Bell, John Bell?
Well, I tend to think it might have been a tulpa-like thing. You mentioned the word tulpa, and I was impressed earlier in the show. I think these things come and go, much as the natives will tell you that Bigfoot comes and goes. And the tracks, I was talking to a fellow today, the tracks of a certain creature went to a certain point and disappeared. I think they're multiversal creatures that come and go, probably not of their own volition. One possibility.
Joe, remarkable call. Thank you for sharing that with us, because that does check out, because, of course, in the history, John Bell saw something on his farm like that, a big dog or a dog with a rabbit's head. I've seen depictions of two-headed dogs. Yeah,
it was definitely a rabbit. I mean, it was the shape of a rabbit, but it was the size, I'd say of a size of my dog, that I have right now, a medium-sized dog.
Oh, my gosh.
This thing was, I just didn't want to mess with it, and I said, I ain't never forget it. I'm done with this. Let's go to Nashville or something.
Well, I can deal with a rabbit-headed dog, but if it growled at me, I'd be gone. Done.
Forget it. And it starts to come towards you. I didn't want no part of it.
No, it's
anyway,
like that.
That's the story. Thank you for taking the call.
Yeah, thank you. It's like that spider in Gilligan's Island, where the spiders, I say, they enter the cave, and they're like being blocked by. I saw that thing, and even though it was fake, it scared the hell out of me. It's that same feeling. You're looking at something, you don't understand what it is. It's an animal of some kind, whether it's a huge cat or maybe a dog with, maybe a jackalope for all we care. But I'm just saying something like that is definitely something you don't want to mess with or deal with, especially when it doesn't look familiar to you. So anyway, Paul Eno with us tonight on Ground Zero. Such a joy to have him on the program. And it's true. He's one of the most intelligent paranormal guys that I've ever had a discussion with. He is. He's right on the money. I mean, maybe we even went to the same schools or whatever. And I just know, though, that what he's saying, it just gels with me, because these are some of the thoughts that I've expressed when investigating these things and looking into these things. And believe me, the more you find yourself looking at these situations, the more you find yourself questioning even the idea of having any of these things be part of an afterlife, maybe a dimensional thing, or like we were talking about, the idea of what are known as acausal entities that hover in the timeline, but they have no beginning or end. They're just there to make sure things move along, and then they leave. 888-673-3700. We'll be back. I'm Clyde Lewis. This is Ground Zero. Paul Eno is my guest tonight. Quickly, Paul, I wanted to get your opinion on the ghost, the exorcism, the first exorcism being broadcast on television. We've been dancing around it. What's your opinion on this? What could go wrong?
Well, one of the producers informed me of this, and my comment was new achievement in idiocy. One of the problems with these parasites is the more recognition they get, so to speak, the more attention, the stronger they can get. Now here you have a good part of a nation paying attention to this thing, which if it's a legitimate exorcism, I'd be extremely surprised. Yeah. But even if it's contrived, you're giving a lot of attention to something very negative, and that's a really, really stupid thing to do.
Well, and the hype is what bothers me. We're going to the house where the first exorcism was held, and the basis for The Exorcist. And I'm like thinking, okay, why would you go there? First of all, second of all, I don't think there are any demons there because quite frankly, they have an exorcism there. And so the demons have been exorcised. So why go to the house where the exorcism took place with the basis for the Exorcist? It doesn't make any sense.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And so there are times when, cause, I see some of these shows and I figure that they are either they're conversion shows where there's always some element of the occult being used to say, this is why it happened. And then they eventually say, well, I changed my life. I no longer dabble in the occult. And I'm thinking, yeah, these are nice little, paranormal shows disguised as Chick tracts. I don't know. But I wish, though, that, with all of the variety of these ghost shows, I wish they would kind of trim the fat a bit and put only the good ones on. The guys that are really, that are really doing a great job and always come up with, pretty smart, conclusions that aren't necessarily, well, I don't believe anything's happening. I mean, no one's, people are calling you to come to the place to investigate it. They have they've seen this. They've experienced it. And then some ghost group shows up for like 3 days and says, I didn't see anything, so obviously nothing's happening. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, we're always making pilots and being contacted by producers, but I'll tell you, Clyde, they always come back and say, in so many words, you're too intelligent.
Yeah, that's the problem. And that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why I'm hardly used on these TV shows, because I don't feel right about making stuff up. It's like I was saying at the beginning of the show when the whole Blair Witch thing happened. I was introduced to Heather Donahue and I was introduced to Eduardo Sanchez. I had him on the show and I immediately realized that Heather Donahue was the girl in the freaking movie. She wasn't the producer they said she was. And I'm sitting here going, I get this. This is fake. And they're making it sound like it's real. Now, if I say it's fake, I'm spoiling the spoiler for everybody. And I don't want to be a spoiler because everybody tells me I'm a spoiler anyway. So, and that's why I'm having a hard time holding back what happened on The Walking Dead last night, damn it. But Paul, great show. Intelligent, fascinating. I hope to have you back again sometime.
Great pleasure, Clyde.
It was just amazing talking with you. Paul Eno on Ground Zero. Remember, he's contributed to this new book called The Bell Witch Project. It's a book talking about all kinds of paranormal stuff, as we did tonight with Paul. Intelligent paranormal talk and investigating. So glad we had him on the show tonight. Paul, thank you again for being on this program.
My pleasure, Clyde.
Take care.